What is up, everyone, and welcome to a very special, not another CFB pod. If you're watching on YouTube, you already know we got Squilly back on, and this podcast is now a part of the Coda Sports Cappers Network. But very excited to bring Squilly on for this final episode of at least the college football season. Obviously, with the national championship coming up, we had a heck of a bowl season. That's kind of in the past. We'll talk about a couple of those big ones. And right now, though, we got to see what's up with Squilly. We got to see how he's been doing. What's up, Squilly?
What's going on, PG? Yeah, no, it's been good. We dropped off there. PG got the big deal with Coda Capper Sports Network. Huge ups to PG. That's amazing. I dropped off, had a busted computer for a few weeks. So I was on the DL and had to get back up off IR. So it's good to be back. Been watching college football. Bowl season as always. Entertaining as hell. A little different this year with how, way more bowls, way less stars playing. So just kind of an interesting dynamic that you may want to keep looking at as we move forward here, because every year it seems like there's a new bowl on the horizon. But yeah, ready for this national championship, ready for my dogs to take it home. We'll see if they can get over the hump. As Pedro Martinez once called the Yankees, call them my daddy. That's kind of how Alabama has Georgia in this day and age. So we'll see how we can do, and we'll definitely cover it as we get through here on the pod.
Yeah, right on. I think you also hit a great point, which is we had so many guys opting out this year. It's becoming increasingly more important to check. This year, there was a great list one of the writers for the Action Network had that he kept for every bowl game. These are the guys that are not going to play. These are the guys that maybe play, blah, blah, blah. It was just a list of every single bowl game. And I just had that thing as a bookmark, and I looked at it every day before I bet. And then, you can make some very educated guesses on the state of the teams as well in these bowls. Like, I want to talk about my favorite bet maybe of the whole season, which was the last game, Kansas State versus LSU. We were all in on Kansas State minus 7.5 because all of LSU was sitting out. They had an interim staff. They barely played the game in the first place, and we smashed it. It was like 42-7, and then I think LSU scored a couple garbage time touchdowns, one at the very, very end of the game. But yeah, that's a great point. You always got to be looking at things like that. So do you have any did you have any key big bets that you hit that you were really proud of?
So that I was proud of, I kind of just nothing that I went crazy for. I sort of watched the first half of bowl season because I didn't have, I wasn't looking for the opt-outs. I wasn't keeping an eye on it. And I was waiting for these semifinal games. And I kind of just did a classic trail. Like if people listen to the earlier episodes where I was on, I always loved Bama first half. That was my big bet constantly until they sort of started to kind of, as I said, you bet it until they show you that they can't. And kind of halfway through the season there, when they started to taper off a bit, obviously before that huge SEC championship win, I kind of got away from that. But in this game against Cincinnati, the line was tight, given it was a 7.5 points in the first half, and then tracked onto that. I was like, Bama's just going to keep running the ball here in the second half. So I took their second half as well. I know our buddy Murph on Twitter. He tweeted at me. He's like, Cincinnati might not get another first down through the rest of the game. And this was halfway through the second quarter. And I was like, let's take that into consideration going into the second half bet here. I did have a whopper of an L though. I bet the Michigan money line. I ate all the Michigan cheese.
Me too.
Looked over to my, even though it was my Bulldogs playing against them, I ate all the Michigan cheese, took the spread, definitely took the money line for way too much and took a big fat L there. So not proud of that. Got to make sure that I get that brain flush at the beginning next year before the semifinals hey, play chalk. The favorites always win and win by a lot.
It's been that way ever since the college football playoff started. Usually the team that's favored is not only going to win, but win big. Only a couple of the games have even been close in the semifinals. But yeah, that day in particular, New Year's Eve, we were in the car all day long. We had 4 bets up. I think we went 0-4 that day. Not only that, I knew we were going to get out of the car during that Michigan-Georgia game. And I was like, okay, at least I get to watch part of one of the games. This is going to be great. I have Michigan +9. I took it right, basically when the lines dropped. So I had Michigan +9. I sprinkled the money line too, because that was part of my article that I wrote on codasportscappers.com. And I was so pumped. And we got there. I turned on the TV. I already knew the score. But as soon as I turned on the TV in the Airbnb, it was another big Georgia score. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to cover any bets today. I'm not going to do any well at all. So I ate the Michigan cheese too. But we should note that Georgia looked awesome that game. They completely stifled everything Michigan was trying to do. I don't think Michigan played their best game offensively, but that's got to be credit to the way Georgia prepared and that defense especially. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, I just remember one distinct play from there where it's like I think it's a counter play that Michigan tries to run. It's a pulling center, and he runs right into one of the defensive tackles of a vacated spot while they're running a stretch play. And, Michigan won their, the best offensive line in the country this year.
Yep.
The guy just got blown up. He got stood up even before the line of scrimmage. And, as a former center, that pains you. When you're the pulling center, you got to make your block because you're usually the smallest guy on the line. Mm-hmm. And you're hoping for someone, maybe a linebacker who's breaking through that open hole. Nope, it's a Georgia defensive tackle, and you have to eat it. But I will say that, when that video came out, that clip of the guy in the sunglasses on the Michigan O-line, they're walking in, they're run the damn ball
run
shirts.
The damn ball.
I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Is this the Letterman jacket game that the Texans played with the Patriots again, all over again? You can't do that stuff when you're coming to play the biggest, baddest defense in the last 10 years.
That's a great point, Squilly. When you're the underdog, don't give the big dog a reason to bite you even harder. You know what I mean? That all you're going to do is piss them off. And so that completely backfired. And I actually didn't see that clip until after the game. If I had seen that before, I may have hedged my bet a little bit and just jumped on Georgia, because that's always a bad sign.
Exactly. See, I saw it before and still went on Michigan because I wanted that big money line winner in the semifinal because, we haven't had a great semifinal game in a long time.
Yep.
I mean, the one I think back to is obviously the Oklahoma-Georgia game.
Yep.
Where that was one of my favorite games I've ever seen.
Very fun.
I'm hoping for that same level of magic that we can get back for the college football playoff.
Well, maybe so, because I think the Rose Bowl's back in the rotation next year, potentially. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, the Rose Bowl's always kind of iconic. I guess we can start by, we're going to kind of cover a few of the big bowl games, and we can start with that Rose Bowl this year. Was Utah and Ohio State Buckeyes. I had a great day on this day, on January 1st. This was the day of the wedding we were attending, and so I couldn't just sit in front of the TV the whole time, but I had lots of tweets to get out and lots of things, and the interaction on Twitter was really fun, and I told people not only Utah +4, but also Utah money line. And I'm sitting there at the wedding. We're at the reception, and Utah's up 2 scores. They're up two touchdowns. I did a video of my drink, and we were at this we were in the farthest south part of Texas, but it looked like it was palm trees everywhere. It was very had a Florida feel or something like that. Very nice.
Yeah. And
the music's playing soft, and I do this little video panning around, thinking it's all good. I'm up 2 scores, and before I knew it, Ohio State had maybe gotten within 7 or tied it up, and it was getting late, and I was at this point, it was the part of the reception where there's a few people dancing, but people are kind of trailing off. So I open up my phone. The first play of this game that I watched was Cam Rising getting knocked out of the game, and me realizing that Utah no longer had a chance. But somehow, they go down 7 and then go and tie it up with this backup. I guess he's technically the 3rd string quarterback because their 2nd string got transferred. And then I'm like, okay, I got a shot. But at least, Ohio State goes right down the field, but at least they settle for a field goal, win it 48-45. So I still get the cover, but I did lose the money line. But just an incredible game.
I mean, it was a phenomenal. I was riding with the boys on the Utah money line. I thought that was the interaction on Twitter all day was so funny. Yeah. Just following that, and especially in that stretch in the second quarter where there were 6 touchdowns scored, and 5 of which were within 2.5 minutes of one another. All and half of the big plays. Britton Covey, Smith and Jigba, one thing about this game that if you go back to the point we were talking about the opt-outs. This is where the positive side of the opt-outs come in, because a guy like Smith and Jigba, if Olave's on the field and then Marvin Harrison Jr., he doesn't go off for 375 yards on 14 catches and 3 touchdowns. That doesn't happen if Chris Olave plays. So you get a legendary performance in a legendary iconic venue like the Rose Bowl in a game that I will remember this game. I mean, the last Rose Bowl I remember is the classic USC Penn State Saquon Sam Darnold game. remember where I was when I watched that one of my favorite games of all time. Still, it's a game, it's just to win the Rose Bowl. And that space, that scenery out there in Pasadena just brings out the best type of football. And I thought, the Utes were fantastic. They played a hell of a game. But, in the end, CJ Stroud was just dealing on them in the second half. And Utah just couldn't pull away far enough in the first half. CJ Stroud and Smith and Jigab they were all over the field. It was unstoppable. And so it was just a blast to watch.
Yeah, very fun. It was just one of those things where you kind of felt like no Utah lead was safe,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really, I knew we were up 2 scores and that's a good sign, but I knew how fast Ohio State was able to score, that it wasn't going to be a problem for them to get back in it. So there was never like a comfortable time. Every time, Ohio State scored, I was sitting there thinking, okay, now's when they kick it in and turn this thing over and just start winning the game, and all hope is gone. So the fact that the one play I watched was the starting quarterback getting knocked out, it just tilted me off. But luckily we found a way to cover, and it ended up being a good day for me. But we had lots of those kind of bowl games that were just like super high scoring, crazy games. One of the other games we were going to talk about is the Music City Bowl, which was Tennessee versus Purdue. This game went into overtime. Not a ton of games this bowl season went into overtime. I had the over. I liked Tennessee going in, but I had the over. And there was a point in this game where I was like, I'm about to get the most disgusting, this game was just super high scoring. I don't remember what total I had, but it was super high scoring. And then all of a sudden the fourth quarter came around and nobody could score for the first part of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this really going to happen? Are we going to miss this? And then, the end of the fourth quarter happens. Let me read off the scores, and this is just under 3 minutes. So we had a 70-yard TD pass from Purdue. And then with a minute left, we had a touchdown from Tennessee. They ended up tying it up. And then in overtime, all we get's a field goal. But this play that Tennessee had on the first overtime was really controversial, and I'm sure you saw it. But It was a play where they almost scored 4th and goal, basically on the goal line. He was kind of stopped, but he wasn't down yet. And then at the end, as the referee's getting ready to blow the whistle, he reaches the ball over the line. And then the refs start really blowing the whistle. And then they end up calling forward progress, which is not reviewable. So you could say Tennessee got screwed, but either way, it was an electric game. And ended up, I think I had like over 70 something, and the total ends up being 93. So I ended up covering very easily, but it felt like for a long period in that fourth quarter that I wasn't going to get it. So we had 4 touchdowns within 5 minutes in that final quarter. So
just
a ridiculous game.
I 100% understand you being there, being like, oh my God, look at how everything's going for me. The scoring's happening. And then, 10 minutes go by, for almost 10 minutes in terms of game clock.
Yeah.
And you're like,
0.
there has been no scores. It's a touchdown game. I have no idea where, one score doesn't get me to a winner there. It definitely could have been a disaster. And in that, in that sense, I think the craziest part about this game to me was the guy who was playing quarterback for Purdue was a 3rd string walk-on.
Yeah.
And he just came out and started just dropping dimes in the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. It was an impressive game. And to the point of the controversial call, I think it was when I watched the replay, I could see either side. Because I did see forward progress get stopped, but the guy, he did end up reaching the ball over. It's a tough bang decision for the refs to call, and they had to make the call. And what happened first was the distinct, I wouldn't say, maybe not distinct, but a pretty significant stop of forward progress for an amount of time where they're college refs. They usually blow the whistle faster than the NFL ones do. They don't let that clock gain. But with that, this could have been one of the crazier games, but I would argue that it wasn't as crazy as the Cheez-It Bowl, but it did end in a controversial way. The Cheez-It Bowl, for some reason, is the most insane bowl every single year. That one year it was like Cal. It was Cal versus, I forget, and it was like 7-3 at the end. And it was Cal versus TCU, and there were turnovers galore, but nobody could score. It was an amazing game to watch in terms of just existing during bowl season as a complete anomaly. And it was much better this year because Clemson, after their debacle of a season, just so happened to be in this game as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Cheez-It Bowl now. I had Clemson 3 or something, I think, in this one. And it looked for a long time like that was going to be an easy winner. I think, let me look at the game flow, but Clemson was up at one point 20-3. And I'm sitting there, and this is late in the third quarter, and I'm like, okay, easy cover. Iowa State's not been able to do a thing on this, really stout Clemson defense, even without their defensive coordinator. And then all of a sudden, Iowa State messes around and starts getting a bunch of stops. And I think part of this was Clemson playing a little bit too conservative. But then we looked up in the fourth quarter, and Iowa State's driving with the ball. Maybe the wackiest play we've ever seen, where Brock Purdy, the quarterback, scrambles for a first down on fourth down. And it was like fourth and kind of long. I want to say like 4th and 8. And a guy punches the ball out of his hands, and it goes backwards past the first down sticks, and he recovers it again. But now he's short of the first down marker, and it's Clemson's ball. And it was just the weirdest, most kind of like nobody knew exactly how they were going to rule it. Like the offense kind of stayed on the field for a sec, and they were like pointing the other way, like, nope, that's a turnover on downs. But somehow the Cheez-It Bowl every year finds a way to be wacky. And this year they had I can't remember what the Cheez-It mascot's name was. It was like Prince Chesward or something like that. It was some cheesy thing.
I have no idea.
That game is just crazy, though. It always is.
I don't know. I mean, I just thought it was so crazy because, you were exactly right. Clemson was kind of meandering around. Their offense, just like they did all year, were doing really poor in that sense of actually being able to move the ball, get down the field, and score points. One of their only 2 touchdowns was a pick 6. And, it could have been a complete disaster in the end there, but a classic slapstick play that you might as well play that yakety sax behind, where Brock Purdy's scrambling and then he spins out and the ball comes out and he has to go get it, goes behind the yellow line. Just a classic Cheez-It Bowl there, where you're sort of sitting at the end of it and you're like, kind of in a dazed sweat, and you're like, what the hell just happened? And why did I even, it's 4 o'clock on a random December day, and you're like, what am I doing?
I could be doing something better. It was so funny. You make a good point with the yakety sax because of how far the ball went and how fast it went. Like, it got knocked out of his hand and just flew maybe 10 yards behind the line, and then he jumps on it. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not a first down. I think we just covered. Let's go, But, I mean, that's just what you get with those kind of bowl games. I thought the last one we'd close out with was the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. This was Oklahoma State and Notre Dame. Oklahoma State pulled out a late victory. This was kind of one of those, like, tale of two halves thing. Oklahoma State got a score at the very end of a big score at the very end of the first half to make it 14-28, but it just felt like Notre Dame was the better team. And in the second half, I don't know if it was kind of an issue of, Notre Dame obviously had that interim coaching staff. I don't know if that was the issue or what, but Oklahoma State found a way to rally all the way back, but still yet found themselves in positions to lose that game. Notre Dame played some great defense down the stretch and almost lost. I think Oklahoma State, if the stat I heard was correct, was in the red zone 6 times and got 6 points. So something like that. So Notre Dame's defense really came up big, but an absolutely electric game. I think we had Oklahoma State money line in that one. So it was good to get that hit. But yeah, I mean, that game, the Fiesta Bowl seems to be one of those that usually delivers too.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Fiesta Bowl, obviously one of the all-time classic football games, that Fiesta Bowl all the way back in, I think 10 years ago, the Boise State Oklahoma game, not too great for you, obviously.
Cursed.
But, it almost goes to show you there that AP, that was an Adrian Peterson year, which is crazy. But to this Fiesta Bowl, I mean, it looked like Notre Dame was rolling off all that high energy they had when they brought Freeman in after Kelly left them, and Jack Cohn had like 360 yards passing in the first half, and then I think the Oklahoma State Cowboys that were, if they did punch it in the Big 12 championship, were going to be in the conversation for the 4 seed. I think that team showed up. That defense specifically showed up in the second half, but their offense continued to just, I mean, Oklahoma State, this game should have been close in the end there. They ended up, they had to settle for field goals multiple times in the red zone in the fourth quarter. Spencer Sanders fumbled it in the end zone. They fumbled it right outside the end zone. But Notre Dame just couldn't capitalize. They would fumble. They would then go 3 and out. They would throw a pick, and then they turned it over on downs after a huge fumble by Sanders, almost in the end zone. So it's just like Notre Dame, I'm happy for them. Happy they got their guy in Marcus Freeman. Happy for all our Notre Dame boys out there. We love the Freeman era, but I don't know. They're gonna have to reload. Their defense was definitely affected by an offense, obviously with Kyron Williams, but Kyle Hamilton stepping out as well. They were hit heavily by the opt-outs, and obviously due to the tumultuous nature of the last month of their program. You see a lot of good stuff in the first half, but they just could not hold on in the end. And they had a lot of opportunities to take advantage that their offense just could not get in anything on the Cowboys defense. It was crazy.
Yeah, this was a game that featured 4 turnovers, but also 1,150 yards of offense. So it's like, you had good offense at times, you had great defense at times, costly turnovers, in big moments. Super fun and kind of encapsulated everything I love about college football bowls. We had it all. We had the full spectrum. The only thing that sucked is, like you said, we had a couple key players out for Notre Dame, but I think they should be encouraged. I thought they played really well.
Yeah, no, I think Notre Dame is. Obviously Freeman is a great hire. I think he coached that defense up significantly. I think they'll be in a good spot. Obviously, they're doing better than freaking Brian Kelly, who's changing his accent every few days and then saying that Boston doesn't have an accent. I don't know what the hell's going on. He is delusional. But I guess everyone down in Baton Rouge will believe anything he says because he's their new savior. So
until they start losing, yeah. Right now, he's on their good side.
Oh yeah, the calls for his job will come soon once they start. If things don't turn around quick.
Right. Well, the main purpose of this show is to talk about the national championship. But before we jump into the national championship, I wanted to get a quick ad read out of the way. Not Another CFB Pod is sponsored by Moneyline Dice. Moneyline aims to revolutionize the sports betting market through the creation of both functional and novelty products that bettors of all levels will enjoy. Spotted by its golden peaks, the Moneyline logo symbolizes winning and winning big. Featured products include Moneyline Sports Betting Dice, Moneyline Sports Betting Pocket Notebook, Snapback Hat, and more. Use the promo code CODA10 to receive a 10% discount on your next order. That's promo code CODA10 for 10% off your next order at moneylinedice.com. Okay, with that out of the way, Squilly, it's time to preview the Natty, the national championship, and the big bad SEC is back. Georgia Bulldogs at 13-1 versus the Alabama Crimson Tide at 13-1. This is the best 2 teams. It's not maybe what everyone wants, but it's the best 2 teams.
Oh, yeah. Listen, you go away from the BCS system, you go to the football playoff. It's always the best if you have the best 2 teams at the end of it all, and they duke it out regardless of if they're in the SEC. I know people have SEC fatigue. That's a major, for people who don't love college football, I understand the SEC fatigue. But if exactly, the casuals. But if you love it, this is what you want to see, and you want to see, especially after that SEC championship game where Alabama completely flipped this Georgia defense on its head and attacked the weaknesses pretty much at will, which are, with Georgia, you get them deep, you get them outside, you don't play with that front 7 that they got, and you don't play within the 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, because that's going to cause you problems, and especially with the way Alabama played, with how their offensive line, who was terrible for most of the year, but then started picking up 5 rushers at a time. Bryce Young escapes, throws one deep. I'm just really excited to see the adjustments that Kirby Smarts makes, the adjustments that Saban and Bill O'Brien then make in return, and to see if Bama, I don't know, Bama just didn't play well against Cincinnati. They kind of sleptwalked through that game, and I know it's the national title game. I know they have at least a full week, 2 weeks off here before they have to play the game after their last one. But I don't know. It's going to be an interesting game here because Georgia, I think, is really frothing at the mouth to get another shot at this Bama team.
Definitely. Definitely. And you make a great point about both these coaches I have a lot of respect for. Obviously, Nick Saban may be the GOAT, and Kirby Smart maybe the best recruiter in the game, and he's turning out great teams and great defenses over and over again. But these teams did square off in the SEC championship game, just a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. And the final score was Georgia 24, Alabama 41. Alabama, they put together a really great game plan. They scored 24 points in the second quarter. And after that, when once Georgia looked up and found itself down by that many points, I think they kind of had to abandon the run game a little. Yeah. Maybe play a game that they weren't used to playing, and Bama kind of cruised to a pretty comfortable victory. I guess my question is in this one, and I looked at this game quite a bit in evaluating the national championship game. How much should we take stock in that SEC championship game?
I mean, for me, when I consider that SEC championship game, it was a complete 180 from the way both of these teams have been playing on their primary, the primary sides of the ball that had won them games early in their year. Georgia, obviously, was led by their defense, and their defense was not getting pressure with 4. In the second half of the game, they started to bring 5, an extra rusher in, and start rushing 5, which against Bryce Young and his legs, like, if you can't contain him in the pocket and you rush 5, and he was getting free all the time, he can pick you apart with those guys. Obviously, now that they don't have Mechie as at a full participation, and Georgia only has to game plan for Jamison Williams, and obviously Alabama's receiver room is stacked, but Mechie's their number 1 receiver, right. So they got to slide someone in there who can at least fill some of that production. Georgia's defense might approach this a little differently, and the way Alabama's offensive line played against Georgia was phenomenal. They passed everything off perfectly. The communication was completely on point. Protections were absurd. I just don't know if this Alabama O-line can replicate that performance with a new protection scheme now that Georgia knows how they successfully protected last time. I think there's a lot less room to sort of switch strategies as an offensive line. It's really mostly about execution, whereas with defense, you can be, and especially the Georgia defense, you can be a lot more malleable with what you do, who you bring in, whether you play power, whether you play more speed. I think it'll be really interesting to see how Kirby Smart essentially approaches getting to Bryce Young, who didn't look himself against Cincinnati. I want to repeat. He looked like there was something going on with, I don't know if it's a shoulder, it's a hip, but he wasn't throwing the ball with power. It also could have been those Cincinnati defensive backs who are the best unit in the country in terms of the secondary.
They're pretty Cincinnati definitely deserves some respect for that one. I did want to share Alabama in this one is 2.5-point underdogs after that big victory in the SEC championship. An over-under of 52. We'll kind of cover, I think the way we'll do it, Squilly, is we'll kind of cover which side we prefer, and then we can also cover maybe the over-under, how we think this game's going to play out, because that's a pretty low number for a game that, like I said, was 41-24 before. I mean, that's way over 52. So be interesting to see how we think that's going to play out. I'll be honest with you, Squilly. Right now, I jumped on Alabama plus 2.5. I haven't touched the money line yet. The way I look at this is I don't want to overthink it. That first game between these two did happen. I don't want to use that as my only bullet point, the only crutch I'm leaning on, because it's one game. And like we said, Alabama jumping out to that big lead forces Georgia to maybe play a game that they're not used to playing. So you can't use that game too much. I just think in this one, we've got the better quarterback, Bryce Young. We've got, I think, the better coach in Nick Saban. I think it's okay to say that, even though I'm a huge Kirby Smart supporter. Nick Saban obviously has the pedigree. He's won a bunch of championships. Mm-hmm. I'm betting on Nick Saban in a big spot. I'm betting on the Heisman winning quarterback in a big spot. That's the way I'm leaning. I haven't touched the money line yet. So I think that, a lot of the reports I've seen and stuff is the Sharps, according to Action Network Pro, they like Georgia in this one in the rematch. And if you look at when top 5 teams rematch during the season, the loser of the first one, I think, has won the rematch 4 out of 5 times or something like that. So we'll see, but it does seem like there's some kind of correlation where the loser can sit there and go, okay, they got us the first time. We're still a good team. We can make adjustments. I think Kirby has a good enough staff that can make adjustments. Georgia's offense looked way better against Michigan than they had pretty much all season. I was a big fan of the way their offense was playing. So if they can keep any of that coming into this one, I mean, Georgia could easily, run it up. But right now, I'm going to lean on Bama plus 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make in terms of my lean, I think you make a great point there about how Georgia's offense played in the playoff, in the semifinal. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sort of a question in terms of where I lean, it's a question of where do I feel with the two quarterbacks who are in this game in terms of the last two games I've saw them play. Mm-hmm. Alabama, when they played Georgia, Bryce Young, that was his Heisman moment. He came out, he absolutely dominated in the SEC championship. And then he goes and, they get a few weeks off, obviously, before the college football, the semifinal, and the Cotton Bowl, and Bryce Young looked pedestrian. He looked human, pretty significantly that whole time. They obviously weren't asking him to do very much because they knew they could run the ball the whole time. But when he was asked to throw, it was lackluster. It was to the outside. It was short field. He rarely got it downfield except for maybe one to Jameson Williams. And then with Stetson Bennett, it's kind of the opposite. He was completely, destroyed, chewed up, just absolutely taken advantage of by the Alabama defense in the SEC championship. He looked like the walk-on that he is. And then against Michigan, he's dropping dimes to George Pickens. He's, throwing 30-yard, like moon balls, dropping them in the corner of the end zone, dicing up this Michigan team who, shut down, obviously what we saw was an extremely effective Ohio State attack in the Big Ten championship. You're playing to get into the college football playoff. So for me, essentially with that, being the difference there and it being a plus margin, I'm sort of in the middle here, and we spoke about this before, but in terms of my betting edge, I would probably want to stay away from the spread, at least in the full game. I do like Georgia minus 0.5, minus 1/2 in the first half. Essentially a Georgia pick'em to cover that first half spread and just be ahead, because I think that in these big moments with Alabama, as we've seen pretty frequently, and in Georgia Alabama matchups, obviously different teams, but if you trend it backwards, Alabama usually has their success after they have the opportunity to make adjustments on offense.
Yep.
And sort of see what Georgia's doing and then capitalize on that in the second half when the defense is a bit more tired, when they think they're, really holding them and getting a chance. So I like the Georgia first half play in terms of the spread. In terms of the full game, for me as a Georgia Bulldogs fan, I got to go, I'm debating whether I'm doing this, but I'm going to do something. Bama's at plus money. Alabama at plus money in the national championship. It's Nick Saban. It's the better coach. It's the better QB. You're exactly right. I like the money line there, because what that gives me is if I lose, I just got to put a value number on a Georgia national championship, and I bet that amount on the Alabama money line.
There you go.
And then I'm good. And so how much do I value a Georgia championship? Is it $100? Is it $200? Is it $10,000? So that's the emotional hedge. I definitely don't think it's $10,000, but in terms of where I would bet from my personal standpoint, in terms of where I see an edge, it's Georgia first half, and where I see the best outcome for me, it's Alabama money line.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the emotional hedge. I've definitely been there a bunch of times, and definitely because that way you're guaranteed to have a pretty decent night. Obviously for you,
exactly.
you'd rather the Georgia win, but even if they don't, it's like, hey, I had Bama money line, so what can I be too upset about? The one interesting thing,
exactly.
Yeah, the one interesting thing I see in this one is the over/under is only at 52, and as we said, that first total went up to 65. So this is on turf again this is in the Dome in Indianapolis. Let me get the name of the Dome, because I feel like I need to respect the Dome, but it's not on here. It's where the Colts play.
What's the Indy stadium?
Lucas Oil.
Lucas Oil. Yeah, Lucas Oil.
So sorry to the Colts fans that have been screaming at their earbuds.
Apologies to Indianapolis.
It's a lovely city. I've been there. It's awesome. But so we got turf again. In the first matchup, we were turf at Mercedes-Benz, the new stadium in Atlanta, which seems to be maybe a little shorter turf. It's a very fast surface. But in these bowl games, a big edge I've found is I love betting overs, especially in the domes, but especially on turf this bowl season. So in this case, we've got a dome, obviously, and turf. Seems like the national championship games in the past have just flown way over. Obviously, the Bama-Ohio State game, one of my biggest bets of the year, was on the over in that one, and then just slammed over that thing. And so I'm kind of liking the over, but I know there's some money on the under too. It's pretty interesting the way I see this game playing out. Both defenses are going to make adjustments. Like you said, without John Mechie, what does Bama's offense look like explosively? Obviously now that's a primary receiver that Georgia doesn't have to worry about as much. They can slide some coverage over to the deep threat. Maybe this does go under, but 52, man, it's such a low number. It's kind of trying to entice you into taking it. Maybe it's a trap. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. So for me, the way I look at this over-under is I look at Alabama's team total. And Alabama is right now on the book I'm looking at is a, +3 at -120. So, obviously a +2.5, -110 type figure. But their team total is 24.5. I think Alabama scores more than 24 points, and I think they score a significant I see that number, I see that 24, and I think to myself, regardless of the adjustments that Georgia makes, this Alabama team is explosive. They have a lot of weapons all over the field. They have the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. I would be shocked to see them go under that 24.5. And I think this will be a close game. So for me, I feel like I got to take the over if, by that transitive logic. I love the over 52 here. I think it's a solid number. I would be very surprised. And as we've seen in a lot of these games, the totals get approached, but that's mostly because in the semifinals, it's a huge gap between who wins and who loses, and you're kind of counting on a garbage time score like that over 46 in Georgia-Michigan. I pray for anyone who had the over 46 in that. That was brutal for you. But with these two teams, with the way that Georgia, obviously recency bias has gotten us before, but with the way that Georgia team played against Michigan, who's a good defense, I think similar in caliber to Alabama's defense, if I can be quite honest.
Yep.
If Georgia can stay ahead of the chains and Bama has to be the one to play a little bit of catch up and come from behind in the second half, which is sort of what I'm seeing here with, with the way I'm thinking about this game. I think that Bama team total over 24 I don't think it smashes. I don't think this game's going to end like 42 to 39 or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a pretty solid bet to take that over 24.5, and then by transitive property, take that over 52, especially on turf, and especially with, and Lucas Oil Stadium, turf, atmosphere, great place to watch a game. Shout out Indianapolis. I think that over 52 comes out. And if not, it's a very close L.
Well, I love it. Then I've got to jump on this over too then before it I'm just afraid this thing, they're trying to trap people in now, and then as soon as the game gets closer, everybody likes to bet the day of the game. I feel like this number's just going to go way up to like 56 or 58. Then you're going to kind of be on the fence. 52 just seems like a low
you definitely
number to me.
Getting in now is much better because Monday will roll around. And unless heavy money's coming in on the under, the public will drive that over number up at least a couple points, I would expect. I would be shocked. Maybe not. Maybe people are rational like us, and they think it's a trap, and they take the under, and it kind of goes 50-50. But I like this number here. I like the over, given the way I think this game is sort of going to fail out. And I mean, for me, the way I think it's going to go, keep an eye out for that second half over. See how that plays, especially if it's a low scoring first half. If it's a high scoring first half, then maybe stay off it because you're on track to hit the whole game. But if you're not on track, keep an eye on that second half.
I love it. I love the breakdown. Mm-hmm. So I guess that'll conclude that part of the show. We so excited to have Squilly back on the show. Everybody needs to show some love to Squilly because he's the legend, and it's been an awesome bowl season, and it's been an awesome season in general. We're going to try to do more spaces going forward. I kind of lacked on that. The problem is normally on a game day, I've had a few drinks. And so like going live, the idea of like managing a live, room, a live chat is kind of like a little daunting. But the news is now on spaces, you can just record them. So that was the whole thing before that is we wanted to record the spaces so that we could, post them to social media, any funny clips or whatever. But now that's just a feature built into Twitter, I guess. So maybe we'll get more into that. Squilly, do you have anything to say to close us out?
I just want to say thanks, PG, for having me back on, bringing me off the DL. I love being here. Love the first 5 weeks we did, 5 or 6, before I had to, get that computer surgery. And you're absolutely crushing it, my guy. You are the legend. People love you. People love your picks, your write-ups, everything like that. The graphics, most especially. Yeah. So we love to see those. But keep doing what you're doing. Let's get this. Let's see how this game goes. And obviously we understand with the spaces, game days, especially once the Pac-12 After Dark gets going, you get some. It's not just the hosts of the spaces who've had a few to drink. It's anyone else who's coming in.
Everyone.
So it's always a little bit chaotic. Yeah. But man, I appreciate you having me on. It's great to break it down, talk this stuff, and end all be all. Go Dogs or big hit for my wallet because Bamba money line, emotional.
There we go. I love that. I thought I would leak this part too here. I think going forward, obviously college football season's going to end, but the one idea I have is to bring some Twitter personalities on, some friends on like Squilly, and just talk sports. Just be real casual with it. I know I talked to Meerkat today, who we're all a big fan of.
Let's go.
Meerkat's going to come on a show. We're going to kind of maybe talk about the NFL playoffs and what he sees. He's an NFL sharp and also just an all-around great guy. But that's kind of the plans going forward. I'm sure we'll have Squilly on again just to talk sports and just have fun on the pod. So we appreciate all you guys tuning in and showing love. Be safe out there. Enjoy the Natty. It's going to be a good time. Let's go points. Let's go, whatever your bet is, let us know. And let's have some fun. Peace, guys.
Later, everybody.